Nothing out of the ordinary until, that is, you spot an innocuous painting hanging on a cracked wall. It's nothing fancy, not a Rembrandt or a Picasso, just a quaint little landscape that seems to have been forgotten over time. But as you take a closer look, something doesn't feel quite right. The frame is weathered, and the back of the canvas is strangely taped down, almost as if someone wanted to make sure no one ever looked there. Curiosity piqued, you peel back the tape to uncover a hidden map, an intricate map that seems to lead to something much bigger than just a simple plot of land. What would you do? Would you follow that map, or would you walk away, never knowing what it could reveal? This isn't just a story about a forgotten painting, it's the beginning of a journey that uncovers secrets that have been buried for decades. Secrets that could change everything. Welcome to a mystery that will keep you on the edge of your seat, a tale so deep and twisted that even I didn't expect where it would lead when I first stumbled upon it. You might think you know what's coming, but trust me, you have no idea what's in store. Now, I know what you're thinking, this all sounds too good to be true, right? Estate sales, hidden maps, and crimes from the past. It feels like something ripped straight out of a crime thriller or a true crime podcast. But I promise you, this isn't just another fictional story. This is real, and every twist you're about to hear could be a piece of a puzzle you didn't even know existed. By the end of this video, you will have all the answers to questions that are probably swirling in your mind right now, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of what's about to unfold. The clues are here, and this painting, well, it's the key. But here's the thing, as much as I want to share everything with you right now, I can't. This is just the beginning, and we're about to dive deep into this mystery together. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how much danger was involved, and how much history had been erased to keep this secret buried. It's not just about a hidden crime, it's about a story that was deliberately hidden away, a tale that someone didn't want you to hear. But, by the end of this video, I'm going to show you what the map led to, who it led to, and why it matters today. And let me tell you, the conclusion will leave you speechless. So, what's the deal with this map? Where does it lead? And why has no one ever discovered it before? How does something so small, so seemingly insignificant, hold the key to a crime that's been covered up for decades? And what does it mean for the people involved? This isn't just a simple story of an old painting and a hidden treasure map. No, this is a puzzle that stretches across time, and with every new clue, we're getting closer to revealing a dark secret that's been protected for far too long. As you watch this, I need you to ask yourself one thing. How far would you go to uncover the truth? Would you risk it all, your safety, your comfort, your peace of mind, to follow a trail that could lead you down a path filled with danger and uncertainty? That's exactly the decision I had to make when I stumbled upon this painting. And by the time you get to the end of this video, you'll know exactly what happened when I made that choice. Now, let's take a step back for a second. What do we really know about estate sales? They're just ordinary events, right? People clearing out the belongings of a deceased loved one, hoping to find a few items worth a little money. But in reality, estate sales are often much more than that. They're like time capsules, containing fragments of people's lives, their memories, their secrets. And sometimes, if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, you might stumble upon something that's far more valuable than anything you could buy for a few bucks. That's exactly what happened when I first laid eyes on that painting. And it didn't take long for me to realize that this wasn't just any estate sale, and this wasn't just any painting. There was something bigger at play here, something that had been hidden in plain sight for years. And I needed to find out why. As I dug deeper into the history of the painting, the map, and the people involved, I uncovered details that I could never have anticipated. What started as a curious find quickly spiraled into something far darker, a story so twisted that even I was left questioning what I'd discovered. But trust me, we're not even close to the most shocking part yet. The deeper we go into this mystery, the more questions arise. Why was this crime kept a secret for so long? What lengths did people go to in order to keep it hidden? And most importantly, who else was involved, and how does their story tie back to this painting and the map it contained? There are some things you should know about this story before we dive in. First, this isn't your typical unsolved mystery video. This isn't just a tale of an old crime, a forgotten painting, and a map. No, this is something much bigger, a story about people, power, and the lengths they'll go to keep the truth from coming to light. But it's also about the pursuit of justice, about the courage it takes to uncover a truth that someone doesn't want you to know. And in a world where so many stories go untold, it's up to us to bring them to the surface. That's what this video is about, uncovering the truth, piece by piece, no matter where it takes us. But just when I thought I had everything figured out, I stumbled upon something that shook me to my core. Something that made me question everything I thought I knew about the case and made me realize that the story was far from over. What I thought was a simple estate sale painting leading to a decades-old crime? Well, that was just the beginning. I'm about to share with you a discovery that changed everything. And trust me, you're not going to believe what happens next. Before we move forward, I need you to promise me something. Don't look away. This isn't just another mystery to solve, it's a story that could change the way you see everything. The pieces are coming together, and what I'm about to reveal will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about hidden crimes, secrets, and the lengths people will go to bury the truth. So, are you ready? You're about to uncover a story that's been buried for decades. Keep watching, because what comes next will shock you in ways you never expected. As the mystery deepened, I began to realize that what I had uncovered was far more than just an old painting with a hidden map. It was a thread, one that would pull me into a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and people who would go to great lengths to keep their past buried. But why? Why would someone go to such extreme measures to hide a piece of history? That's the question I kept asking myself as I looked at the map, trying to piece together what it meant. You see, this wasn't just about an antique painting. This was about a decades-old crime, a crime that, for reasons I still couldn't fully comprehend, someone wanted to stay hidden. This letter had been written nearly 40 years ago, and from the tone of it, it was clear that the relationship had ended abruptly. The more I read, the more I realized that there was a connection between Eleanor and this man, and that connection seemed to stretch back to the same time period as the crime that the map might have been leading to. The timing was uncanny, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was just a coincidence, or if there was something much more sinister at play. The name Thomas Caldwell started to echo in my mind, and the deeper I dug, the more I realized that he might not have been as innocent as the letters suggested. In fact, the more I learned about him, the more I began to suspect he could be one of the key figures in this entire mystery. But who was Thomas Caldwell really? According to his history, he had been a local businessman, someone with connections, but nothing too out of the ordinary. A man with a reputation for being a little too charming, a little too good at getting what he wanted. But there were whispers. You know the kind, those rumors that spread in small towns like wildfire, the kind that are never confirmed, but are impossible to ignore. Some said Caldwell had been involved in shady dealings, that his business interests weren't always on the up and up. Others speculated that he might have been connected to organized crime, though no one had ever been able to prove it. It all seemed so nebulous, but the more I dug, the more the pieces started to fall into place. What if Caldwell had something to do with the crime the map pointed to? And if that was the case, what did Eleanor know, and why had she kept it all hidden for so long? Of course, this wasn't the only lead I had. As I continued to investigate, I came across other strange details, things that didn't add up. For instance, Eleanor's finances were surprisingly well organized for someone who had lived such a quiet, private life. She had a number of large deposits in her bank account over the years, ones that didn't make sense given her modest lifestyle. Some of the money had come from businesses that were listed under Thomas Caldwell's name, though the records didn't explain much. Why had Eleanor been accepting money from someone who seemed to be involved in all sorts of suspicious activities? And what was she hiding behind that carefully arranged estate sale? It felt like every question led to another, and no matter how deep I went, the answers only seemed to raise more doubts. As I ventured further into the mystery, I began to realize that Eleanor wasn't the only one with a connection to the past. There were others, people who had once been close to her, people whose names I kept hearing in hushed tones, people who didn't want to be found. It became clear that the map wasn't just leading me to one crime, it was leading me into a web of deceit that had spanned decades, involving people who had long since disappeared or who had quietly gone on with their lives as though nothing had ever happened. And yet, as I unraveled the threads of the past, I began to sense that something even darker was lurking just out of sight. The deeper I went, the more dangerous this whole investigation felt. There were too many coincidences, too many unanswered questions. But one thing I couldn't shake was this nagging feeling that someone was watching me. It wasn't just paranoia, it was a gut instinct that told me I was getting too close to something someone didn't want me to find. But who was it? Was it Thomas Caldwell, trying to bury the past once and for all? Or was there another player, someone I hadn't even considered yet, who had their own reasons for keeping the truth hidden? I couldn't stop now, though. The map was right there in front of me, and every moment I spent piecing this puzzle together felt like a step closer to unraveling a truth that had been locked away for far too long. But the more I uncovered, the more I began to realize that this story wasn't just about a painting, or a crime, or a forgotten piece of history. This was about something much more personal, something that tied directly into the very heart of who I was and why I had found myself on this journey to begin with. But that was a story for another time. Right now, the most important thing was to figure out who was hiding the truth and why. And just when I thought I had a handle on everything, I stumbled upon a lead that turned everything I thought I knew upside down. The game had just changed again. Just as I thought I was starting to make sense of the tangled mess I had found myself in, something happened that completely changed the game. It wasn't just me anymore, someone else had been dragged into this, someone I cared about, and someone who had no idea what they were getting involved in. It all started with a phone call. I had been so focused on the map, on Eleanor, on the strange connection between her and Thomas Caldwell, that I hadn't noticed how much my investigation had begun to bleed into the lives of those closest to me. The call came late one evening, just as I was reviewing some old police records I had managed to get my hands on. It was my older brother, Mike, someone who had always been skeptical of anything remotely mysterious or criminal. "You're not going to believe this," he said, his voice tight with disbelief. "I just got something weird in the mail." At first, I figured it was nothing, junk mail, or maybe a misdirected piece of mail meant for someone else. But then, he told me that it wasn't just an ordinary letter. It was an envelope, addressed to him, with no return address. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper with a cryptic message written in black ink: "Some secrets can't stay buried forever." The handwriting wasn't familiar, but the tone of it, the way the words were structured, struck a chord deep within me. It was the same kind of ominous, cryptic language that I had started to see in my own investigation. The kind that hinted at something far darker, something that shouldn't be uncovered. And it didn't take long for me to realize the letter wasn't a coincidence, it was connected. Somehow, it was tied to everything I had been uncovering about Eleanor, about the crime, and about the map. It was as though someone was sending a warning: stop digging, or else. Mike wasn't the type to back down from a challenge, but I could tell by the way he spoke that this shook him. He had never been involved in anything like this, and I could tell he was trying to make sense of it. But the more he talked, the more I realized that whatever was happening was no longer confined to the past, it was reaching into the present. Someone was aware of my investigation, aware of the map, and they were willing to go to extremes to make sure it stayed hidden. What bothered me even more was that the message wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge, one that seemed to dare Mike, and by extension, me, to uncover the truth. The stakes were higher now. It wasn't just about an old crime, it was about a far-reaching conspiracy, one that involved people who had no intention of letting it surface again. I tried to keep my brother out of it, told him to forget about the letter, to stay away from the investigation, but I could tell it was already too late. The more we dug into this, the more intertwined our lives became with the dangerous web that someone had worked so hard to construct. I had thought that Eleanor's past was the key, that the map in her painting held the answers to everything. But now, it seemed like the map wasn't the only thing people were trying to hide. Someone, somewhere, was actively trying to steer us away from something much bigger, something that involved more than just one crime. It involved a network, a long-standing conspiracy that was threatening to unravel if we kept going. That was when I found the next clue. It wasn't something that had been intentionally left for me, it was more of a slip-up, an accidental discovery, the kind of thing you stumble upon when you're getting too close. I had managed to track down an old acquaintance of mine, someone who had once worked as a local historian, a man named Jack Lawson. He had a reputation for knowing things about the town's history that no one else did, and I hoped that he might have some insight into the painting, or at least something that could help me make sense of the events surrounding the estate sale. But when I sat down with him and mentioned the name Thomas Caldwell, he immediately tensed up, his face paling as if he had seen a ghost. He hesitated for a moment, before finally admitting something that made my blood run cold. He knew Caldwell, not just as a local businessman, but as someone involved in far darker dealings. Jack told me about a period in the late 70s, a time when the town had been shaken by a series of unsolved disappearances, all of which had been quietly swept under the rug. What Jack didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that these disappearances were the very thing I was beginning to suspect the map might be linked to. I hadn't connected the dots yet, but now it was clear. Thomas Caldwell had been at the center of it all. The map, the cryptic letter Mike had received, it was all pointing toward a long-buried secret, one that someone was willing to kill to protect. And now, with Mike's involvement, it felt like we had crossed a line that we couldn't uncross. I should have stopped right then. I should have listened to Jack's warnings, to Mike's concerns, but the truth was, I couldn't let it go. The more I uncovered, the more obsessed I became with the idea of finding out what had happened, with understanding what had truly transpired all those years ago. And yet, every new lead brought more questions than answers. There were too many inconsistencies, too many pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. For every person I spoke to who claimed to have information, another one contradicted them. And all the while, the threat of someone watching us, someone who wanted this mystery to remain buried, loomed larger. At the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that the closer we got to the truth, the more we were being manipulated. It was as though the people involved were using the investigation as a game, pushing us towards certain revelations, leading us down dead ends, then pulling us back when we got too close. The stakes had escalated dramatically. Mike was already involved, and now it felt like there was no turning back, not just for me, but for anyone connected to this case. And as I sat there, trying to make sense of everything, I realized something chilling. The people behind this weren't just trying to cover up an old crime, they were trying to erase an entire chapter of history, one that was threatening to expose everything they had worked so hard to bury. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how deep this went, how many people were involved in keeping the truth from seeing the light of day. And now, with Mike dragged into the middle of it, the risk was higher than ever. Whoever had sent him that letter wasn't just threatening me anymore, they were threatening the people I loved. And with every piece of new evidence, with every step forward I took, I had to ask myself, who could I trust? Was everyone connected to this story hiding something? Or was there a hidden force pulling the strings from behind the scenes, watching, waiting for the moment when they could finally shut everything down for good? I had to find out before it was too late. I thought I was on the brink of uncovering everything, the truth, the hidden crime, the people who had been trying to cover it up for decades. But just when I thought I had the answers, just when I thought I was starting to piece together the final moments of this twisted story, the world as I knew it shattered. Everything I had believed about the investigation, about the people involved, and about the map, suddenly felt like a carefully constructed lie, one that was crumbling in my hands. It all started a few days after Julia's strange disappearance. I had tried calling her multiple times, leaving messages, sending texts, but there was no reply. At first, I told myself she was just scared, needing space to process everything that had happened. But the more time passed, the more I realized something was terribly wrong. Julia wasn't the type to just vanish, especially not without a word. Something had changed, and it wasn't just fear, it was something darker, something more sinister. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled deeper into this web, and that if I wasn't careful, I would lose everything. Then, the call came. I had been in my apartment, pacing back and forth, when my phone rang again. This time, the number wasn't unfamiliar, it was Julia's. My heart raced as I answered, hoping for some sort of explanation, some assurance that she was okay. But what I heard on the other end was not what I expected. Her voice was weak, barely a whisper, and there was a panic in her tone that sent a chill down my spine. "You need to stop," she said, her words trembling. "Everything you're looking for, everything you think you've uncovered, it's all wrong. You don't understand what you're getting into." I felt a wave of confusion flood over me. "Julia, what's going on? Where are you? What are you talking about?" But she didn't answer. Instead, there was a pause, a deep breath on the other end, and then the words I never saw coming. I'm not the one you should be looking at. It's him. It's you, she whispered before the line went dead. I stared at the phone, frozen, trying to process what she had just said. It's you. What the hell did she mean by that? I had no idea how to interpret it. Was she accusing me? Was she warning me? The words echoed in my mind, but I couldn't make sense of them. Had she been manipulated? Or worse, had I been manipulated? I needed to find her, to make sure she was safe, but every instinct told me to be careful. She was clearly afraid, and whatever had happened to her was much bigger than I had realized. But that wasn't the biggest twist. No, that came later, when I went back to the estate sale for answers. I had been trying to track down every person who might have known Eleanor, anyone who might have seen something strange around the time she passed away. And that's when I ran into someone I never expected, someone who had been right under my nose the whole time. It was Thomas Caldwell's daughter, Melissa. I had met her briefly during the sale, but she had always seemed aloof, disconnected. I thought she was just another bystander, someone who inherited her father's business without much interest in the past. But when I found her standing by the old mansion, looking almost like she was waiting for me, something in my gut told me that I needed to hear what she had to say. "You've been looking in the wrong places," she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge of authority I hadn't expected. "You're asking all the wrong questions." I couldn't help but be taken aback by the sudden shift. "What are you talking about?" She gave a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You think this is about the map, about Eleanor, about some long-forgotten crime. But you're wrong. You've been chasing shadows." My heart pounded as she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The crime you're looking for, it's not about who did it, it's about who didn't." I felt the ground shift beneath me, my mind struggling to catch up. "What do you mean?" "Your investigation," she continued, "it's not uncovering the past. It's uncovering a lie. And if you keep digging, you'll expose something that's been hidden for far longer than you think. You'll find out things about your own family that you won't be able to ignore." I didn't want to believe her, but the words hit like a punch to the gut. My family? What did she know about me? About my connection to this? I thought about the strange letter Mike had received, the cryptic warning that had felt so familiar. Was it possible that the people who were trying to stop me weren't just trying to protect their past? Were they trying to stop me from uncovering something that had to do with my past? I wanted to demand answers, to push her further, but before I could say another word, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in shock, struggling to piece together the pieces of this puzzle that was quickly becoming more dangerous than I had ever anticipated. And then, as if that wasn't enough to shatter my world, I received another call. This one wasn't from Julia, though. No, this time it was a number I recognized all too well, my brother, Mike. His voice came through the phone, but it wasn't the calm, collected tone I was used to. Instead, there was fear, desperation in his words. "I don't know what's going on, but you need to listen to me. It's not what you think. I've been talking to people. There's a lot more at stake here than you realize. I think we're being played." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. What was he talking about? Who was playing us? And how deep did this go? I sat in silence, my heart pounding in my chest, knowing that the person I trusted the most was now caught up in this twisted web. The walls had closed in, and now I wasn't just questioning the past, I was questioning my own family, my own role in this whole thing. Had I been part of the story all along without even realizing it? Was I somehow connected to this crime in ways I couldn't even imagine? I had thought I was getting closer to the truth, but now, it seemed like the more I uncovered, the more the mystery unfolded, the more I realized just how little I knew. And I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was pulling the strings, watching, waiting, and always one step ahead. The next few days felt like a blur of mounting pressure, confusion, and dread, as if the very air around me had thickened into something suffocating. Every time I tried to make sense of the mess I'd found myself in, it seemed like the pieces shifted again, slipping away from my grasp. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not even myself. The more I uncovered, the more everything I thought I knew about this investigation, about who was behind it, who was at risk, seemed like it was just another layer of manipulation. My own brother, Mike, had warned me that things were spiraling out of control, but I hadn't fully understood what he meant until it was too late. Now, I was faced with a choice that I never could have imagined, one that no one in their right mind would ever want to make. I had just gotten back to my apartment, my head spinning with the conversation I had with Melissa Caldwell. Her cryptic warning about my family was still echoing in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something huge, something I didn't fully understand yet but knew I couldn't ignore. And then, my phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Mike. "Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks. We need to talk. Don't bring anyone." I didn't hesitate. I knew something was wrong, something had shifted. The tone in his message felt urgent, frantic in a way I hadn't seen before. He had always been the calm, composed one between us, the person who kept things steady when everything felt like it was falling apart. But now, there was nothing steady about him. I grabbed my jacket and left, the weight of what I was about to do settling heavily on my shoulders. I couldn't escape the feeling that this was the point of no return. The warehouse was a place I had driven past countless times but had never thought much about. It was old, abandoned, sitting at the edge of the city where the industrial district met the water. As I approached, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The air felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. The dim lights from nearby street lamps cast long shadows, making the place feel even more isolated, as if I were walking into some kind of trap. When I finally stepped inside, I saw Mike immediately, standing in the middle of the cavernous, decaying building, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt. He looked like a man on the edge, and the look he gave me told me everything I needed to know. Something was terribly wrong. "Mike, what's going on?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "You wanted to talk. What is it?" He turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something: regret, fear, and maybe even guilt. But before I could react, he spoke. "It's too late," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if saying it louder might make it more real. "You're too deep in it now, and I should have told you sooner. But I didn't want to believe it, didn't want to believe what we were really involved in." The words didn't make sense. "What do you mean, what we're involved in? Mike, just tell me what's happening. Why is everything falling apart?" Mike took a shaky breath, his eyes darting around the warehouse as if he expected someone to jump out of the shadows. His hands trembled at his sides, and for the first time, I saw fear in him. The same kind of fear I had been feeling for days now. "I never wanted you to get involved in this. You should have never found out about the map, about everything connected to it. I was trying to protect you, to keep you out of it. But it's too late. You've already seen too much." I didn't know what he was talking about, but the pieces were starting to come together in a way that made my stomach churn. "Mike, what are you saying? What are you involved in?" He hesitated, then, finally, with a tremor in his voice, he admitted, "Dad. I found out about what he did. And I tried to bury it. I didn't want you to know because I knew it would tear everything apart. But it's all coming back, and now we're both in danger because of it. What we've been chasing, it's tied to Dad. Everything is tied to him." My mind reeled as his words hit me like a freight train. My father, the man I had trusted, the man who had raised me, had somehow been involved in this mess all along. I couldn't process it. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my past, suddenly felt like it had been constructed out of lies. This was the secret I had been uncovering all along. The missing piece of the puzzle. I took a step back, struggling to breathe. "What did he do, Mike? What do you mean? Tell me." But he didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at the floor, as if weighing his next words carefully. When he finally met my gaze, I could see the agony in his eyes. "I tried to protect you from this," he said. "But I can't anymore. You need to know the truth, even if it means losing everything." I waited, breathless, as the tension in the room grew thicker. But before he could speak again, the door to the warehouse creaked open. I spun around, my heart in my throat, expecting the worst. The last thing I wanted was to be caught in some kind of ambush, especially not after everything that had happened. And then, the silhouette stepped into the dim light. My breath caught. It was Julia. "Mike, We need to leave. Now, she said, her voice strained, her eyes wide with fear. They know we're here. We've been followed. Mike's expression twisted, torn between two worlds. One look at Julia and he understood. There was no more time to talk, no more time for explanations. Whatever had been going on, whoever had been pulling the strings, had finally cornered us. Listen to me, Mike said, grabbing my arm urgently. I tried to keep you out of it, but it's too late now. You're already involved. They'll come for us. But we have a choice to make. We can either run and leave all this behind, or we can stay and fight for the truth, for everything we've been trying to uncover. But you have to decide right now. If we stay, if we keep pushing, we'll risk everything, our safety, our lives. We'll be exposing something no one's ready for. But if we run, we lose the truth forever. The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stood there, my mind racing. Could I walk away from this? Could I just let it all go, knowing what I knew? Or was the truth worth risking everything? I felt my heart pounding in my chest, my head spinning with the impossible choices in front of me. The truth was closer than ever, but so was the danger. The clock was ticking. Whoever was after us wasn't going to wait much longer. The choice hit me harder than any punch could. There was no running from it anymore. It was too late for me to walk away, too late for any of us. But just as I thought I was ready to make a decision, just as I was about to say the words, to push through and choose a side, everything shifted. The air in the warehouse thickened, the hum of the outside world growing faint, and then everything exploded into chaos. It started with a sound. A loud bang echoed through the building, the kind of sound that rattled your bones, like a door slamming shut when you thought you were alone. And then the lights flickered, casting everything in eerie flashes of dark and light. My heart raced as my eyes scanned the shadows, searching for the source of the sound. Get down, Mike yelled, pulling me toward cover as another explosion rang out, followed by the sharp crackle of gunfire. My pulse surged in my ears as I ducked behind a stack of old crates. I had never been in a situation like this before, but in that moment, I knew we weren't just being hunted by some faceless threat. This was bigger, way bigger than any of us had ever imagined. Whoever was after us didn't just want the map. They wanted us, too. I turned to Julia, her face pale with fear, but she wasn't moving. She was staring at something, her eyes wide. Julia, what is it? I demanded, but she didn't answer. She just pointed. And that's when I saw him, Thomas Caldwell. I couldn't believe it. He was standing at the far end of the warehouse, a gun in hand, flanked by two men in dark suits. He wasn't the victim in all this, he was the mastermind. My stomach twisted with the realization that everything I had thought about this case, about the people involved, was wrong. It wasn't about protecting a secret anymore. It was about power, control, and manipulating everyone around us for their own gain. You shouldn't have come here, Thomas said, his voice dripping with smugness as he stepped forward, the gun still raised but not aimed at us yet. His eyes glinted with something that wasn't just evil, it was cold. Like he was enjoying watching us squirm, enjoying watching the entire world we thought we knew fall apart. I tried to warn you, but you insisted on digging too deep. Why? I choked out, struggling to understand how we had gotten here. How had we been played so thoroughly? He smirked, the satisfaction in his expression enough to make my skin crawl. You think this is about your little investigation? About the map? About some decades-old crime? No. This has always been about something bigger. Something global. My mind reeled. Global? I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. What was he talking about? This wasn't some kind of world-changing conspiracy, it was supposed to be about a long-buried crime, a map, a lost secret. What do you mean by global? His smirk grew wider, almost predatory. It's simple. The people who want the map don't care about your family's secrets. They care about what that map leads to. And you're right about one thing, it's not just about the past. It's about what's been set in motion. That map leads to something far more valuable than you can possibly imagine. Something that will change everything. I swallowed hard, trying to process it, but there was no time. As if on cue, more men stepped into view from behind crates and shadows. They were armed, too. I could see now, this wasn't just Thomas Caldwell's show. He had allies, and he had power, influence, and an army of people willing to do whatever it took to make sure their secret didn't get out. Then, as if the weight of everything that had just been revealed wasn't enough, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Mike. "It's not just Thomas. Someone else is working with him. Someone you know." The words hit me like a cold wave. Someone I knew? Who could it be? Who else was involved in this nightmare? My mind raced. And that's when I realized something. It wasn't just Thomas. It wasn't just the people with guns. No, the betrayal was far closer than I ever could have imagined. I turned to Mike. He was standing there, frozen, his face pale as he stared at the scene unfolding before us. His eyes locked with mine, and in that moment, I understood. He knew. "Mike," I said, my voice shaky, but the fear in my chest pushing me forward. "Tell me what's going on. You're not just here because of the map, are you?" Mike looked at me, his expression betraying something I didn't want to admit. There was something in his eyes, a look of guilt, of resignation. "I didn't want you to get involved, but I had to do this. They gave me no choice." His words made my heart stop. They gave me no choice. A sickening realization began to crawl its way up my spine. Mike wasn't just caught up in this, he was part of it. "You've been working with him," I whispered, my breath catching. "You've been working with Thomas this whole time?" Mike looked at the ground, unable to meet my gaze. "I didn't know what else to do," he said, his voice low, filled with shame. "They promised me protection. They promised us both safety. But now you're in too deep. And there's no going back." I felt the ground beneath me shift, the entire world spinning out of control. My brother. The one person I had trusted more than anyone else. And now, I understood he had been playing both sides, keeping me close so that I would keep digging, so that I would unravel the secrets that ultimately served him and Thomas Caldwell. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as the gravity of the situation settled in. There was no one left to trust. Not even the person I had called family. "Get down," Julia shouted, snapping me out of my spiraling thoughts just in time to see one of the armed men raise his gun in our direction. The world exploded in a blur of noise and chaos, gunshots ripping through the air as we scattered, running for our lives. I didn't know if Mike would follow. I didn't know if he was even on our side anymore. All I knew was that I had no choice but to keep running. To keep fighting. Because now, it wasn't just about the truth. It wasn't just about uncovering a hidden crime. No, it was about survival. And I had no idea who would make it out alive. The warehouse was a labyrinth of shadows and smoke, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning wood and the unmistakable metallic tang of gunfire. My heart was pounding in my ears, my breaths shallow and ragged, as I sprinted through the broken maze of crates and rusted machinery, with nothing but survival on my mind. The gunshots had stopped, but the tension hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating, oppressive. I had no idea where Mike was, or even if he was still alive, but that didn't matter anymore. All I could focus on was the terrifying reality that I had been thrust into. My family, my life, everything I thought I knew, had been part of something far darker than I ever imagined. I had to find the truth. I had to find the key to ending this, no matter the cost. The sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse, and I pressed myself flat against a wall, holding my breath as I waited for the next move. I had no weapon. No plan. Just instincts that were beginning to fray under the pressure. The footsteps grew louder. Whoever was coming, they were getting closer. I didn't have much time. Then, through the smoke, a figure appeared, familiar, but terrifying all the same. Thomas Caldwell. He stood tall, unscathed, with a cold smile playing at the corners of his lips. Behind him, several men moved into view, but Thomas didn't seem worried. In fact, he seemed calm, too calm. Like he was enjoying this, like this was part of his plan all along. "You think you can stop this?" he said, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness of the warehouse, each word landing like a blow. "You think you've uncovered something that matters? That's cute. But you're too late." My blood ran cold, the weight of his words sinking in deeper than I expected. "You don't know what you're dealing with," I shot back, struggling to sound more confident than I felt. This isn't just about you, Thomas. It's about everything you've done. Everything you've lied about. His eyes narrowed. No, you don't get it, he said, his voice suddenly cold. This is bigger than you. Bigger than any of us. The map, your father's secrets, they were just the beginning. The real game is far, far more dangerous than you can comprehend. You're too small, too insignificant in the grand scheme of things to understand what's truly at stake here. It was like he was taunting me, pushing me to understand just how little control I had. But I couldn't let him win. Not now. Not after everything. My family was in the middle of this. My father's legacy was tangled up in it. There was no turning back. Then what's the truth? I demanded, stepping forward despite every instinct telling me to retreat. What's the real story behind all this? For a moment, Thomas said nothing. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder at his men, signaling them to step aside. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out something from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table in front of him. It was the map. The very map I'd been chasing, the one that had haunted my every step, the one that seemed like an ancient relic but was so much more. You want the truth? Thomas said, his voice almost amused. This map doesn't just lead to some hidden treasure. It leads to power. To a hidden society, one that's been pulling the strings for generations. My family's involvement in this was just the beginning. And your father, well, he didn't just help us find the map, he was the map. I froze. What did he mean by that? My father was the map. I repeated, disbelief washing over me. What does that even mean? Thomas' smile deepened, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Your father didn't just discover the location of that map. He was the one who encoded it. The secrets in his journals, the cryptic symbols, the clues you've been following, they weren't just written down. He was the key to unlocking the true power hidden in that map. My mind spun. My father had been at the heart of all this. He hadn't just left me breadcrumbs to follow. He had been part of a conspiracy, a vast and shadowy network, all these years. I could barely process the enormity of the revelation. You're lying, I spat, though my voice wavered, doubt creeping in. You can't be serious. Why would he do that? Because he was desperate, Thomas replied, his tone sharp now, almost mocking. Your father wasn't the man you thought he was. He knew exactly what he was involved in, and he made sure you stayed out of it. But his greed, his obsession with power, it made him careless. And now, you're the one who's going to finish what he started. A sickening realization washed over me like cold water. My father hadn't been some innocent bystander. He hadn't been trying to protect me from this conspiracy. He had been trying to control it. To hide it, to ensure that it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. But now, the wrong hands, Thomas and his network, had it all. And they weren't about to let me walk away from this. I took a step back, my pulse racing, as my mind scrambled to make sense of everything. The man I had trusted, the man I had spent my whole life idolizing, had been complicit in something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The stakes had always been higher, but now they felt like a weight, pressing down on my chest. You think you can stop us now? Thomas continued, his voice low and dangerous. You think you have the power to take this from me? You can't even begin to comprehend what's at stake. You're a pawn in this game, nothing more. And you can't win. And just when I thought I had reached the breaking point, just when it felt like everything was slipping out of my grasp, there was one last twist. Mike appeared from the shadows, walking slowly toward us, his face pale and set in grim determination. But there was something different in his eyes. Something colder. My heart stopped as I realized what was happening. Mike. I whispered, my voice hoarse, the word catching in my throat. What are you doing? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward Thomas, his eyes locked on the man who had orchestrated all of this from the shadows. Then, to my utter disbelief, Mike reached into his jacket, pulled out a gun, and pointed it straight at me. I staggered back, my heart hammering in my chest as every muscle in my body went rigid with shock. Mike, no, what are you doing? His face twisted with regret, but there was something else there, something dark, something final. I'm sorry, he said quietly, almost as if he were apologizing for what he had to do. But it's over. You have to understand, I don't have a choice. It's bigger than you. Bigger than me. This isn't something we can just walk away from. The gun trembled in his hands. I could see the pain in his eyes, the conflict, but it didn't matter. For a moment, Thomas said nothing. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder at his men, signaling them to step aside. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out something from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table in front of him. It was the map. The very map I'd been chasing, the one that had haunted my every step, the one that seemed like an ancient relic but was so much more. You want the truth? Thomas said, his voice almost amused. This map doesn't just lead to some hidden treasure. It leads to power. To a hidden society, one that's been pulling the strings for generations. My family's involvement in this was just the beginning. And your father, well, he didn't just help us find the map, he was the map. I froze. What did he mean by that? My father was the map. I repeated, disbelief washing over me. What does that even mean? Thomas' smile deepened, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Your father didn't just discover the location of that map. He was the one who encoded it. The secrets in his journals, the cryptic symbols, the clues you've been following, they weren't just written down. He was the key to unlocking the true power hidden in that map. My mind spun. My father had been at the heart of all this. He hadn't just left me breadcrumbs to follow. He had been part of a conspiracy, a vast and shadowy network, all these years. I could barely process the enormity of the revelation. You're lying, I spat, though my voice wavered, doubt creeping in. You can't be serious. Why would he do that? Because he was desperate, Thomas replied, his tone sharp now, almost mocking. Your father wasn't the man you thought he was. He knew exactly what he was involved in, and he made sure you stayed out of it. But his greed, his obsession with power, it made him careless. And now, you're the one who's going to finish what he started. A sickening realization washed over me like cold water. My father hadn't been some innocent bystander. He hadn't been trying to protect me from this conspiracy. He had been trying to control it. To hide it, to ensure that it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. But now, the wrong hands, Thomas and his network, had it all. And they weren't about to let me walk away from this. I took a step back, my pulse racing, as my mind scrambled to make sense of everything. The man I had trusted, the man I had spent my whole life idolizing, had been complicit in something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The stakes had always been higher, but now they felt like a weight, pressing down on my chest. You think you can stop us now? Thomas continued, his voice low and dangerous. You think you have the power to take this from me? You can't even begin to comprehend what's at stake. You're a pawn in this game, nothing more. And you can't win. And just when I thought I had reached the breaking point, just when it felt like everything was slipping out of my grasp, there was one last twist. Mike appeared from the shadows, walking slowly toward us, his face pale and set in grim determination. But there was something different in his eyes. Something colder. My heart stopped as I realized what was happening. Mike. I whispered, my voice hoarse, the word catching in my throat. What are you doing? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward Thomas, his eyes locked on the man who had orchestrated all of this from the shadows. Then, to my utter disbelief, Mike reached into his jacket, pulled out a gun, and pointed it straight at me. I staggered back, my heart hammering in my chest as every muscle in my body went rigid with shock. Mike, no, what are you doing? His face twisted with regret, but there was something else there, something dark, something final. I'm sorry, he said quietly, almost as if he were apologizing for what he had to do. But it's over. You have to understand, I don't have a choice. It's bigger than you. Bigger than me. This isn't something we can just walk away from. The gun trembled in his hands. I could see the pain in his eyes, the conflict, but it didn't matter. In that moment, I realized just how far I had fallen into the web of lies, how deep this conspiracy went. And I knew that no one would be walking out of this unscathed. Then, everything happened at once. The shot rang out, sharp and final, but it wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at Thomas. The sound of the bullet tearing through the air sent everything into chaos, and as Thomas collapsed, his gun falling from his hand, I understood the truth. Mike had never been on my side, not really. He had been a player, a pawn in a much bigger game, forced to make a choice that shattered everything we had ever known. But what did that mean for me? What did it mean for all of us? The room went quiet, and in that silence, I realized that this nightmare was far from over. The dust settled in the aftermath of the chaos, the heavy silence punctuated only by the distant sounds of sirens wailing in the night. My legs were shaking, the adrenaline finally wearing off as I stared at Thomas Caldwell's lifeless body. The gunshot that had ended it all, the gunshot I never saw coming, had been fired by someone I once called family. Mike. He had made his choice. And in the end, it had cost us all something precious. As I stood there, my mind racing through everything that had happened, my father's secrets, the betrayal, the web of lies that had ensnared us all, it was hard to process. What had we really been fighting for? The map? The legacy of a crime buried decades ago? Or had it all been about power, about control, about something far darker than we could have imagined? The pieces didn't fit together neatly, and maybe they never would. I had learned things about my family, about Mike, about myself, that I couldn't just forget. There were still questions. So many questions. But amid all of this, there was a sense of clarity that began to take shape. I had survived. We had survived. And maybe that was enough for now. My father's secrets were buried with him, locked away behind layers of code I would never fully understand. But his legacy, his true legacy, wasn't in the map or the crime. It was in the choices I had to make, the ones that determined who I would become. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control what came next. Mike was gone. His fate had been sealed the moment he chose to side with Thomas. I couldn't save him, and I didn't know if I could even forgive him. He had been torn between loyalty and survival, and in the end, the cost was too high for either of us to bear. As I walked away from the wreckage of that warehouse, the weight of it all settled into my chest like a stone. But it was a weight I could carry. Because I was alive. And maybe, in a way, that was the only victory I could claim. I didn't go to the authorities. Not right away. The police would have questions I wasn't ready to answer, and I wasn't sure what they would make of everything. The conspiracy, the map, the decades-old crime, it was all too much, too tangled in lies and secrets. For now, I kept everything locked inside, holding on to the few truths I had left. I had to move on. I had to rebuild. A few days later, I stood in front of the old house, the one that had been in my family for generations. It felt like a lifetime ago that I'd found the map, a lifetime ago that I had been searching for something I could never fully understand. The house seemed quieter now, as if it too was mourning the loss of everything we had gone through. But there was something else there, too. A sense of finality, of closure. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I had to keep moving forward. As I walked away from the house for the last time, I felt the weight of the past begin to lift. The secrets, the betrayals, they were part of me, but they didn't define me. I wasn't just a product of my family's mistakes. I was my own person. And I had a life to rebuild, a future to find. But as the door closed behind me, a final piece of the puzzle slid into place. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out with a mixture of curiosity and dread. It was a message. No number. Just a single line of text. You think it's over. You're wrong. The real game is just beginning. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the message, the words burning into my mind. Was there more to this? Had I missed something? My breath caught in my throat as I looked out at the empty street, the cold night air washing over me. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun.